In considering what subject matter I would include in this series, knowing that it would be on the Eucharist for this year of the Holy Eucharist, I considered a lot of things, didn't include some things, decided to include others, but one of the things I felt I couldn't leave out was the priesthood. You really can't have a serious discussion about the Eucharist without talking about the ministerial priesthood. So in this final hour of this series, The Power of the Eucharist, I'm going to talk about priesthood and the Eucharist as sacrifice. Let me begin by reading to you from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 5. That has a lot to say about the priest. Every high priest is taken from among men and made their representative before God to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal patiently with erring sinners, for he himself is beset by weakness, and so must make sin offerings for himself as well as for the people. One does not take this honor on his own initiative, but only when called by God, as Aaron was. Even Christ did not glorify himself with the office of high priest. He received it from the one who said to him, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you." Just as he says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. I have spoken quite a bit in recent years about the priesthood. I have been called by a person who knows sports. He was a professional trainer, boxing trainer. And he said to me one day, he said, "You're a counterpuncher." You know, he was trying to categorize me like you would a boxer. You know, some boxers have a certain style, others a different style. So you're a counterpuncher very often. He said, because, you know, certain blows are thrown at the church, at humanity, and then you respond to that. Counterpuncher. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I am. In the last few years, I have been that in my role talking about priests. Now remember, no priest, no Eucharist. Got to remember that, especially this year. This is the year of the Eucharist. No priest, no Eucharist. No priest, no source of the church's life. No ministerial priest, no center of the church's life. No ministerial priest, no summit of the church's life. That's just the way it is. No priest, no Eucharist, period, exclamation point, no way around it. Right at the heart of the church that Jesus instituted. Why did God do it that way? I don't know. You know, that always triggers a remembrance of a joke. I use many recycled Bishop Sheen jokes. I don't have any of my own, so I have to steal them from Bishop Sheen. I don't think he'd mind too much. Bishop Sheen was preaching once on the West Coast, and he was preaching about Jonah being in the belly of the whale for 3 days. And he was going on, yeah, Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days, and a heckler in the back of the congregation, I think he was at a university, maybe UCLA at the time, and the heckler said, how do you know Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days? And Bishop Sheen said, well, when I get to heaven, I shall ask him. And the heckler said, well, what if he isn't there? And he said, well, then you ask him. Whenever I come to a juncture where, you know, I think somebody's going to say, well, how do you know? You know, I think of that joke. But why did God create the entire economy of salvation, as we say? Why did he do it the way he did? I don't know. When I get to heaven, I shall ask him. You know, why did he ordain that there would be ministerial priests in the church, and that they would make Christ present in a sacramental way? I don't know why God did it that way, but I do know he did do it that way. I know that for sure. I know he instituted 7 sacraments. I know 2 of those sacraments, all of them are related, certainly. They're all interrelated. But I know 2 of them especially, priesthood and Eucharist, holy orders and Eucharist. They are especially intimately related. And I don't really see how you can delve into the mystery of the Eucharist this year without also delving into the mystery of the priesthood, because they're so intimately related. Another reason is we know where we are in history. You know, here we are. And we know what's happened in the last couple years in the priesthood, right? With the scandals and so forth. Who could have imagined it? One day a woman grabbed me by the lapel in an airport and she said, "I'm mad at you priests." And I said, "Me too." When's the last time you had to be seen in public like this? When I entered the priesthood, it was quite a respectable calling. Even in the secular world, you had a certain level of respect. At least you were considered a decent citizen with a very noble and decent calling. Now, I don't know. What is the priest? What is the essence of the priesthood? You have to go back to the Old Testament in order to have an intimation of that. Now, there was a priesthood in the Old Covenant, just as there were different kinds of priesthood in the pagan religions. The various pagan religions had priests. The Old Testament had priests, the Levitical priesthood. They had a very much of a common denominator, the essence of priesthood. The priest in the Old Testament was a male descendant of Levi, the tribe of Levi. You had to be a male descendant of the tribe of Levi. And what did the priest do? Well, the priest offered sacrifice. The priest offered a sacrifice in atonement for sin. That was really the essence of what the priest did in the Old Covenant. Also, the pagan priests, they offered sacrifice to their god or gods to appease them, to atone for the sins of the people. The priest was one who interceded between God and men. The priest might offer the sacrifice of a pigeon, a bullock. We recall the mysterious figure of Melchizedek, priest of Salem. You remember what Melchizedek offered? Melchizedek, interestingly enough, offered wheat, grain and wine. Then in the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law to deliver from the law those who were subject to it. Galatians 4:4. There is one absolute and authentic priest. And in the person of this high priest, Jesus Christ, authentic priesthood comes together. There is a difference, however, an essential difference between the Old Covenant priesthood and the New Covenant priesthood. In the New Covenant, the priest offering the sacrifice is Jesus. The high priest offering is Jesus Christ. The victim or sacrifice offered is also Jesus Christ. And so the priest offering and the victim offered are one and the same. In the Old Testament, it was a vicarious sacrifice that the priest offered, something other than himself, something of value. But in the New Testament, the priest offering gave new meaning to offering something of value. For he offered himself, the sacrifice of himself, to the Heavenly Father in atonement for the sins of the world. So you see, sacrifice, self-sacrifice, is the very essence of the priesthood. And the priesthood is so closely allied to the sacrament of the Eucharist. Holy Thursday night, the high priest offered himself in anticipation of what would happen the next day. He outside of time and space, as it were, transcending time and space, he reached forward in time and space and made that event present the night before, just like he does many nights and days afterwards through the centuries. But the essence of it all, the priesthood and the Eucharist, the essence of both is sacrifice. Loving sacrifice. Now, love is a word that has been much bandied about in recent years. We've had a nauseating amount of sermons preached over the years on love. And very often those sermons don't have a clue as to what love actually is. It is not a warm fuzzy. Love is not a warm fuzzy feeling. It is not an emotion. Love is a decision, an act of the will. You want to know what love is? Actually, the substance of it, the essence of it, on the cross. That's love. St. Teresa, great doctor of the church, not Therese, her holy mother, the founder of the Discalced Carmelite order, St. Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Jesus. She said, love is the cross, and the cross is love. Tested love is not love. Or rather, she said, unless love be tested, it's not authentic. So in other words, tested love is true love. Sacrificial love is true love. Very often, we're not quite sure about certain things. You may say, yes, I love my faith. I love this or that. But until that love is tested, we might not be quite sure. I hope and pray I love my faith enough to die for it. But I don't know. I haven't yet had to experience martyrdom. So how do I know, really? And if I'm faced with who knows what torture, would I have enough love? Tested love is true love. Crucified love is true love. Sacrificial love Agape love is Christian love. We have one word in English for several different realities. You know, we say love, right? One word, love. But that can mean I love hot dogs. I love my dog, Sage, or Delta, or Greta. I have a new dog, Greta. She's a German dog, so I named her Greta. Someone asked me if I named her after Greta Van Susteren. And I said, well, no, I don't know if Greta Van Susteren would like that, but I love my dog, Greta. And she's a beautiful dog, so it wouldn't be an insult to Greta Van Susteren. I love my sister. I love my mother. I love my friends. I love God. You see, same word, love. But there are gradations, differences in meaning. In Greek, in Koine Greek, the language in which the New Testament was written, there are different words used. You know some of these words. One of the words, eros, right? That can be a romantic or sexual love. Philia, Philadelphia, you know the word. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Philia, brotherly love, fraternal love. And then you have agape love. That is the self-sacrificing love, the total love which Jesus displayed on the cross. So you see, you've got all these different words, and in English you only have one. Translation's a real problem. When they translated from Greek into Latin or the other vernacular languages, it was a difficult task. In English, you only have one word, love. You know, we would have had to manufacture 2 or 3 other words in order to capture the reality that we're trying to translate. So something's lost, in other words, in the translation. We have very strange ideas often about what love is. More than half of marriages in the United States end in divorce. More than half of Catholic marriages in the United States end in divorce. The divorce rate in the Catholic Church is no different than the divorce rate in the rest of the neo-pagan world. Why? Well, maybe we have as I've often said, a crisis of language. People get married. You know, Joey and Susie are going to get married. Joey loves Susie and Susie loves Joey. Nice. Every now and then, the local pastor will have me meet the couple. You know, they have, you know, the pre-Cana counseling before people get married in the church, right? The prospective bride and groom come in and they talk and they take some classes or whatever from the pastor or one of the priests. And every now and then a pastor will say, boy, I got this couple and they don't have a clue. And I don't know if I can get it across to them. So would you talk to them? And it's like the mothers who come to me and say, Father, would you talk to my son? Does your son want to talk to me? No. But they sometimes wear you out and you do it. So I'll show up that night instead of the familiar, benevolent face of the local pastor. They get me. And I try to be on my best behavior. And I'm nice. Oh, Joey and Susie, about to be married, Catholics, wonderful. That's great. Joey, what's love? You know, they're about to get married. They're experts on love, right? So if you're an expert on love, you ought to know what it is. Right? So it could be an exam question. What is love? Well, you know, Father, love, we got feelings for each other. Feelings for each other. Feelings can be up, and feelings can be down, and feelings can be all around. If all you have is feelings for each other, whew, you'll be a statistic in no time. How about you, Susie Q? Oh, Father, we have chemistry. Right. That could blow up. Okay, the Catholic couple about to get married, experts on love. Don't have a clue what love is. And so I say, how about this? If you love each other, you desire the highest and best thing for the sake of the one you love. They can never argue with that, right? If you love somebody, you want the very best for that person. And they say, well, yeah, good. Okay. And I say, well, what's that? You know, you love Susie here. So, what do you want? What is that love? You know, what do you want for her? What do you desire for your beloved? Well, you know, Father, a nice house. A couple of kids. Well, that's a good thing. You know, a doggy named Spot. Condo on the beach. Early retirement. A 401k plan that doesn't self-destruct. Okay, what else? What else? Oh, come on, Father, what do you mean, what else? What else is there? And then you give them the punchline. How about heaven? How about heaven? You love someone, you want the best for them. What is the best for them? Heaven ain't nothing better than that. Forever. And they always say, I never thought of that. Catholics in love, about to get married. God help me, you know, there's a good reason I'm not a parish priest. Boy, that'd be something. Parish priests have special gifts, believe you me, they do. I don't have those gifts, but you know, that's not wrong to think that way. Very, very important. Love is sacrificial in nature. Love desires the highest and best thing for the sake of the beloved. Now, you and I aren't so different. I'm a priest, you're a lay people, or maybe a religious. We're different, yes, we have different states in life, but we're quite similar in many ways. Now, most lay people get married, okay? So you got husband and wife. You had your wedding day, that was a big day for you. I had my ordination day. That was a big day for me. You might have had a big wedding with a lot of people, so did I. I had 10,000 at my wedding. Pope officiated. And what happened? I always think at this juncture about an experience I had when I was a novice. It was in a pretty big church on Sunday, like this, full. And I was the lector that day. And I read the first reading, and then the choir and the people sang the response. And I got distracted. A very, very lovely young lady was seated right in the first pew. And something passed. I was young then, by the way. And something passed between us. It wasn't a bad thing. You know, it was nothing bad. It was not nothing that it shouldn't have been. But there was an instant of recognition, mutual recognition. That in another time, another place, another world, whatever, maybe she was the one. Something special. And in an instant, I knew I'd never be married. I was certain of it, that I'd never have a wife. And I would never have someone that I could share my life with. I would never have a soulmate, so to speak, a partner. I would never have a wife, a mother of my children. I'd never have children. And there was a terrible, penetrating sadness that about almost knocked me over. It all took place in a split second. But then, right instantly on the heels of that, it was almost like a revelation. Oh yes, you'll have a bride. I'll give you the most beautiful bride in the universe. I'll give you my own bride. And children. You will have children beyond counting. Like the sand on the seashore. Or the stars in the heavens. Oh yes, you'll have a bride and you'll have children. And I never doubted my vocation. From that moment on. We're different, but we're the same. Most of you are married. I am too. My bride is the church. On my wedding day, at St. Peter's Basilica, Jesus espoused me to his mystical bride, the church. Every priest has that, in Jesus, has that relationship to the church. I remember my ordination day very well, like it was yesterday. Greatest day of my life, no question. I floated out of St. Peter's Basilica. Pope ordained me a priest, 10,000 people cheering, 3 choirs singing. My mom was there to witness it. The whole College of Cardinals was there. Mother Teresa of Calcutta was there. And I floated out of the basilica, euphoric. I'm a priest. Thank God. I'm a priest. And that night, I woke up in the middle of the night, my soul was singing, I'm a priest. I'm a priest. Thank God. I'm a priest. I couldn't believe it. I assure you most of heaven couldn't believe it. And for days and months, that happened. I'd be asleep and I'd wake up and my soul, literally, it's a hard thing to explain. It was a spiritual experience. In the depths of my being, I was so euphoric. My spirit was rejoicing. I'm a priest. I loved being a priest. I loved being married to the bride of Christ. Time went on, as it always does. And after about 3 years of ministering here, there, and everywhere, living out of a suitcase, beginning to endure some of the trials priests endure, just like the trials married people endure. You know, one morning early I woke up, looked over and said, ah! What have I done? You don't look like you used to, honey. I work and I slave my fingers to the bone and you don't appreciate me. Bride, church, no matter what I do, it's not good enough. You see, we're not so different. Time goes on. The honeymoon is over. Reality sets in. Not floating anymore, trudging through the mud. Mile after mile after bloody, hard mile. It's no longer romantic. It's no longer idealistic. The euphoria is gone. Down in the trenches with the rest of the troops. I'm very thankful that God works the way he does. My grandmother used to say, "Isn't God smart?" Yes, Grandma, he sure is. He says, "Oh, thank God for God." Amen, Grandma. God doesn't reveal to us everything in advance, you know. Nobody'd get ordained or married if God revealed everything in advance, you know. God is so smart. He reveals just enough. I'll tell you what, if God would have revealed, say 14 years ago, everything that would happen to me in the priesthood, I'd have run like heck. I hate to say it. I think I might have chickened out, headed for the hills. I would have never imagined what life as a priest at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century would be. Never could have imagined it. The places I have been since I've been a priest. Now, I've been a lot of places before I was a priest, and that's not so startling. I mean, I've been to some of the darkest places on the face of the earth. But I never thought as a priest I'd end up having to, I've done some strange things. I walked into a crack house one night, 3 o'clock in the morning, responding to an anonymous phone call. And I picked up a brother priest off the floor and carried him out. Moved other drug addicts and prostitutes out of the way. And a guy stuck a .45 in my face as I was trying to get out the door. I'd have never imagined to do a thing like that as a priest. Another phone call in the middle of the night from a voice I recognized. She had once been a girlfriend of mine in the old, bad old days in Los Angeles. She wasn't a Christian. She was a Jewish girl. We both almost died from cocaine, drug abuse, bad lives. Last time I saw her, she was a beautiful girl. The last time I saw her, the only thing I could think, she'll be dead in a month. And I never saw her again for years. And then one day I was preaching in a Carmelite monastery. And the prioress said, at 2 o'clock, please come into the parlor. And I did. And Mother led out a nun. And beneath the veil, I recognized her. She was there, praying and doing penance and becoming holy so that others could be liberated. And I rejoiced at God's mercy. Because, of course, I knew what had happened to me, but that he also had rescued her. She wasn't even Christian. How could it have all happened? Then, some years later, the phone call in the middle of the night, it was her. She had again fallen from grace. Things hadn't gone well after a point. She left. She was in a brothel, addicted to heroin. She was in debt. And so, in the middle of the night, got in the car and drove to northern Nevada, to her place of exile. And I masqueraded as a customer and went in and asked her. She had given me the name that she used. And I tried to sneak her out the back door, and we got caught by the bouncer. And I paid out $14,000 in cash, the price of her redemption, and brought her back to the prioress. The nuns never knew. And Mother took her back. And she's still there. And I never would have imagined that I would have to do such things as a priest. And time came and time went. 9/11 came, and then the scandals came. And who could have thought it? And it broke our heart. Every day, 2002 during Lent, as always, I was preaching, traveling constantly. And it was like traveling with a spear in your side, a burden on your back. Came to St. Louis to preach a mission. The Archbishop had sent a group of priests to meet me at the airport to ask me to please change my topic and talk about the scandal. And so I did. It was one of the hardest missions I've ever preached. I tried to be fair and balanced, as the news stations might say. I tried to present the question honestly. I tried to be compassionate for the victims and not too hard on the perpetrators of the crimes. The priest brought me a stack of newspapers this big, all the newspapers in St. Louis for the previous 14 days. Every one of them, front page headlines, scandal. Page 2, war in Afghanistan. 8 pastors were removed in those 2 weeks. I became what I later termed an equal opportunity offender during that mission. Because no matter what I said, there were people offended on one side or the other. Either I was too soft on the victims, or too soft on the priests, or too hard on one, or too hard on the other, and I got it from both sides. And I was exhausted. And I went to the airport and waited at my gate that next morning. And there, a common sight one sees in airports, a little child playing on the floor, baby. And at one point, the baby propped himself up on his arms. He couldn't walk yet, but he propped himself up and looked up at me and smiled. Beautiful, irresistible baby smile. And so I smiled back. The only thing you can do, it's normal. Mom snatched that child up and gave me a look that could kill. It was a look that eloquently said, "You're one of them. Don't you even look at my child." She stormed off. Preaching a mission the next week, an angry confrontation. Ah, you're a priest. Someone spit on me. The third time in my life. The first time somebody spit on me in Alabama because a black man was my best friend in basic training in the Army. The second time I'd come home after all my training, dressed in the uniform of the United States Army during an unpopular war. And in the bus station in Albany, New York, another angry confrontation. Spit on me. The third time, wearing this uniform. And I've always considered that 3 badges of honor, but hard to take. And I have to recall in these days that the essence of priesthood is sacrifice. Nobody said it would be easy. I no longer recommend the priesthood to young men for merely human reasons. That was always misguided. But especially now, if you want a respectable job, don't come here. If you want respect from the world, don't come here. If you want an easy way of life, don't come here. If you want a nice soft life and a nice soft rectory, don't come here. But if you're willing to expend blood, sweat, and tears, by all means come. The essence of the priesthood is sacrifice. The essence of love is sacrifice. The essence of the Eucharist is love. The essence of the Eucharist is sacrifice. It is the sacramental representation of the one only sacrifice of Calvary, offered in an unbloody manner whenever Holy Mass is offered. Remember that the standard we march under is the standard of the cross. Lest we forget our lineage, our heritage. It's noble. Jesus was the greatest hero who ever lived. Jesus so loved the world. Our Father so loved the world that he sent his only Son. What did he send his only Son to do? To suffer and die and rise on the third day. And Jesus said, the servant is no better than his master. Where I am, there my servant will be. Well, there he is. A cross looms in our future. No cross, no crown. That's the way it is. How do you do it, though? How can you possibly face such overwhelming odds? I'll tell you this. How many of you saw The Passion of the Christ, the movie? Wow. Boy, now you got that one right. Yeah. You haven't read any papal documents lately, but that's good for you. Well, that's good, though. You know, you'll get the other one right. You know, you'll get the other ones right. You'll start reading, but I'm glad you saw it. Good. Good for you. I saw it in before it came out. I saw it in January. It was a private screening. I saw it in California, in Paso Robles. I was down there preaching in January, and about 30 of us. And they asked me, you know, I believe I was the only priest. There was a Protestant minister there at the time, and I think I was the only priest there. And they asked me about it, what do you think? And I said, well, it's not entertainment. You know, that's the first thing. You know, they said, well, it's a film, it's a movie. Well, no. You know, yes, it's on film, but it's not entertainment. Don't bring popcorn. It's a contemporary form of spiritual exercise. It's like the Stations of the Cross in a contemporary version. I said immediately that it would be a classic. It was a great artistic accomplishment, but it was a spiritual accomplishment as well. Now, you know how powerful, think back for a second, when you saw the film. You know how powerful it was, the effect that it had on people. God so loved the world that he sent his only son. You know how much you love your children. You know how, I don't have any biological children. I never had biological children. I was never married. I can only imagine how much a mom loves her child, how much a dad loves his child. I can only imagine what that must be. When my little sister was 14, she was tragically killed in an automobile accident with 4 of her friends. And I remember walking into the lobby of the hospital, and my uncle was there, and they brought me into a side room where my mother was. My mother was a registered nurse, familiar with hospitals, injuries, sickness. My mother was utterly devastated. I have never seen such suffering imprinted on a face. I'll never forget it. Now you imagine the love of a parent for a child, and then the child is taken away tragically, and you have a dim intimation of the love of the Heavenly Father, who sent his only Son, not just to die, but to suffer in a way that is unthinkable. Why? Love. Love. Authentic, sacrificial, self-donating love. That's the essence of the priesthood. That's the essence of the Eucharist. That's the essence of Christianity. Sacrificial love. Often in looking at the suffering of the world, I marvel at the courage of people. I've always highly respected courage, whether you find it on an athletic field, in the military, in business, facing personal adversity, courage. A friend of mine, a good Catholic lady, sends me periodically, she's a movie buff, and she sends me DVDs, movies, contemporary movies. I don't go to the movies, hardly at all, but I'll watch one on a tape or a DVD. So she sent me Ray. I don't know if you've seen that movie about Ray Charles. Oh, there are parts of it that are not so great, but it conveyed something very powerfully, how this man grew up in the segregated South, poor, disadvantaged, how his mother prepared him for the rigors of life. He said, don't let anybody make you a cripple. Then he went on and became very famous, of course, rich, but he was a heroin addict. And the years came and went, and he lived on the edge and in the middle of a degenerate lifestyle, really. Then he was arrested, and he almost went to prison, and he was coming off heroin. Terrible suffering. And he had a vision of his mother. And his little brother, who had died in front of him, and he always blamed himself and was tormented and haunted by it. And his mother said, "Ray, you've been places I never even dreamed of. But you let them make you a cripple. I told you not to be a cripple." Not his blindness, his heroin addiction. Now, son, don't be a cripple. And he never touched heroin again. He got off of it. But the struggle, the human struggle, and I just use it as an example, because we all have struggles. We all have trials, tribulations, sufferings. Might be physical, might be emotional, moral. God, I have had a bunch of priests over the recent years come to me. You know, traveling around, one of the benefits of being a mission preacher is you don't know anybody, and they don't know you, and they'll come to you in confession, pour their heart out. Very often priests have been struck down by some moral infirmity, not just the sex abuse of minors, but any of the moral things that anyone else can fall to. Priests are human beings. A group of bishops once said to me, "What do we have to do so that these moral transgressions won't happen anymore?" I said, "Don't ordain human beings. Make a deal with God that he'll send you some angels or something, or some of the blessed from heaven who are confirmed in grace. That's the only way you're going to guarantee that some kind of moral transgression won't happen. Now, you better do everything you can to prevent that outrageous business from happening ever again with minors, but there are no guarantees. You know, you better pray a lot, for one thing, get the lay people to pray a lot for priests. But that's the only way. But the priests will come, and they'll pour their hearts out, and they're sorry for the sin, and they're just beaten down, and they're discouraged and on the edge of despondency and despair. And I always tell them, I like analogies with war. That's the only thing I really understand, and God knows it. When I was a little kid, 7 years old, the only prayer I remember in my whole life, other than my formal little prayers, the only spontaneous prayer I remember was, "God, don't let me be like other men and die in bed. I want to die with my boots on." I'd watched a lot of cowboy movies. "I want to die with my boots on in battle. Don't let me die sick. I want to go out in battle." Watch out what you ask for. I'm so discouraged, embarrassed, crushed by my sins, and I say, "Father, in battle a man can be wounded. He's in harm's way. You're shot down in battle, they give you a Purple Heart, they patch you up, and you go back into battle. There's no disgrace in being wounded. The disgrace is in desertion. Don't desert your post. Carry on." And they do. It's not easy. We live in very troubled times. If we don't have mercy in the church, where shall we have it? If we don't forgive in the church, then where will there ever be forgiveness? Every time I preach, I'm aware it might be the last time. Every time I say Mass, every time I raise my hand in absolution, I know it could be the last time. But that's okay. Because no matter what comes, we know that the essence of the priesthood is sacrificial love, and the essence of the Eucharist is sacrificial love. And the two become one. And in that intimacy of love, grace is brought down and souls are saved, and glory is given to God through Jesus, his Son. And so remember these things. Remember these things in the year of the Holy Eucharist. God bless you. God love you. And goodbye.